We had to crew out of Melbourne, but there were no really experienced crew members out of Melbourne, or we couldn't afford them. But what we could afford were people who'd worked in television. So, and particularly, and that meant Crawfords.
They have a huge place in the development of the film industry in Australia. They're just training ground for so many good people. David Egby was someone who was one of their leading cameramen, and most of their crew were from there. And I was trying to do a type of filmmaking which was a pretty classic sort of filmmaking, and it wasn't like photographing action. It was trying to get the camera inside the action. And it was against all what they'd been taught. They were required to get up to 30 or 40 setups a day. And in a sense, the two worlds were at odds with each other. That was one of the things that really, really sort of caused tension between us, because I barely knew what I was doing, and they certainly didn't know what I was doing.
I don't think that the crew, or part of the crew, were really prepared for George.
This guy, he's a doctor who's never been on a film set before, and this guy, Byron Kennedy, who, what have they done?
I was watching this whole thing, intrigued at the process, because I didn't know what it was, and really kind of like almost appalled and impressed at the same time. I'm like, I would look at George and say, how can that work? And he says, it'll work in the edit, it'll work. And you're like, you're kidding me. He says, no, it'll work.
George appeared to be breaking all the rules, and that was said sort of quite constantly, he'll never get away with it. Whereas the reality is, he knew what he wanted to do. He knew that he'd only wanted to use, 2 seconds of a particular shot, and that was going to sort of fit into the whole. He was editing in his head, but people didn't sort of quite understand that. So it created a lot of frustration.
Because by God, I remember the cameraman and George having these slugfests right, in front of everybody about the camera guy saying, George, you can't do that. And he said, I don't care, I want to do it. And he said, but you can't do that. It doesn't follow the rules of filmmaking. And George said, I don't give a shit, I want to do it. And I'm for George, I said, do it, because he was breaking rules, which was good, He'd jump the line and do all sorts of weird stuff that was like, okay, so what? It still works. It worked. He knew what he was doing.
So that was pretty tough for both of us, really, for people like David and myself. And to David's credit, he took on stuff that no one had ever in the world had taken on, to work with such a wide lens, so low to the road, and had a very good sense of montage. Intuitively, he just had never had the opportunity in television to shoot like that.